Hello! So today we're taking a look at the Socata TB21GT in Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's been developed by Lionheart Creations. You may know the developer because they built aircraft such as the Booker Youngman in the simulator, and this aircraft is from the 1970s and it's kind of a bit of a sports car for the sky, or I think that was the intention when the real aircraft was built. So let's go and have a look around it. You can see it has got some kind of very automotive looking stylings to it. So it's kind of very much of its era. And the interior apparently is kind of famously modelled after cars of the era like the Lamborghini and the Lotus Esprit. So it's going to be interesting to have a look around it. So the modelling is good, but it's not fantastic. There's odd things. So if we move the elevator here, you will notice the shapes just mash into the body. There isn't much detail. I think part of the reason for that is this was very early in, or this was developed very early in Lionheart Creations' journey with Flight Simulator, so they were learning as they were going. So their later aircraft are obviously much better, but it's still very good. It's good. It's not exceptional. I think that's the problem. Because you've got other aircraft developed by people like Coronado and various other developers that have really lifted the bar. And especially given the price point, this aircraft costs a little bit more than some of the Coronado aircraft. So it's, yeah, maybe, I very much doubt it will get re-engineered, redeveloped, but you never know. Anyway, let's go and jump inside and have a look at it. So, remember what I said about the 1970s or early 80s sports car feel to everything? It really is, isn't it? It is like being in something like a Lotus or an Audi of that era. It's really quite strange. Okay, so I'm just going to center up the cam. So okay, so the switchgear and bits and pieces around the cockpit are going to feel very alien to you, no matter what era you're coming from. So I'm just going to get rid of the yoke out of the way, and I'll get rid of the yoke on the other side as well. So we want the main power switch on. So it's got these push buttons for the various switches around the cockpit. So we'll go and turn on the nav lights and the fuel pump just for a few moments. You can hear that happening. The sounds are very good. I think the only thing that lets it down is there's a little bit of fidelity is missing in terms of the graphics. So if we go and I'm going to switch away because I need to almost double back on myself here, which is very difficult to do with head tracking. So we're going to go and choose the left fuel tank. And let's have a look around the airplane. So we've got normal kind of flap levers, so obviously that's working because we do have power to the systems. So we're going to put the mixture to rich. We're going to move the propeller to high RPM. As far as I'm aware, the books and things around the cockpit are not clickable, like the maps and stuff. They're just simply modelled shapes, which is a bit of a shame. But okay, so that was the main switch on. We got the alternator button next to it, so we can push that in already. And we'll go and turn the engine over, shall we? So I'll just crack the throttle open a little bit, turn the magnetos to both, and then hold it against start. Okay, let me just check the volume to see if you can hear the engine and you can hear me over the top of it. So I'm going to turn the engine up a little bit. Okay, that's better. Okay, so you can see the needles here. So what happens as we open the engine? Let's see how well modelled this is. I mean, we're not expecting wonders. This isn't an A2A aircraft, and like I said, it was early in the story with the simulator. So the engine response is pretty good. So let's go and turn on the master avionics switch. Wait for the various systems to start up. We can put the transponder on standby. isn't it interesting how you can see that these actually are projected from, or you know, the bars, the pivots of the needles are on the opposite sides. It's quite interesting. Okay, so we'll get the GPS up and running before we do anything. So we'll put the turn coordinator on as well. There's various lights, everything that you would expect to work around the cockpit works. Okay, so GPS is just coming up to speed. Okay, I don't think I have LittleNavMap running yet, so before we get going, while the engine's warming up, we'll just launch LittleNavMap. And we'll do a new flight plan. And we'll go open window layout, default, a center on our aircraft, which will show us at Booneville, which is perfect. Okay, so I guess just to give it a bit of a run out, we'll fly out towards the Mendocino VOR and then fly out towards either Ukiah or Lampson Field. Ukiah is probably quicker, isn't it? It's just over the hills there. So 11230. So it's just an excuse really to try out the radios and make sure everything's working. So we'll change this over to VLOC. So we want 11230. Switch that over to active, and hooray, the HSI has come alive. So we'll calibrate the altimeter as well while we're here. We'll spin the HSI round, and there we go. So that gives us our heading towards the VOR station, which is perfect. Okay, so we'll come off the parking brake, and we've got a small amount of positive thrust there where we were holding 1500 RPM. It's got a very good turning circle, it has to be said. So I'm going to turn on the head tracking because it will help us with this enormous pillar that would otherwise be in our way. So it's kind of a bit of a warning that if you do not have any kind of tracking device, this does have quite chunky supports on the cockpit. It's kind of similar to aircraft such as the Diamond. Is it a DA62? So let's go full throttle. So this aircraft is supposed to be very fast. So coming up through 60 knots, 70 knots, rotate. It's heavy. So let's go outside and have a look. Gear up. And that is a pretty aeroplane, it has to be said. Okay, so let's see what that's doing on the climb out. So it's holding about 120 knots. Just looking at the engine gauges to see what they're doing, and it seems to be happy enough. So let's turn and do a loop of the airfield before we go anywhere. It's a shame it hasn't got a glass roof, so you can't really play any games with looking out over the edge when you're doing a sharp turn. So let's pull it back to 50% throttle. It's interesting that, oh, it has got the RPM there, so, but that's, yeah, is that propeller RPM or engine? Presumably we just have to use manifold pressure for the engine, so that needs to stay fairly high. You'd be looking for about 25, wouldn't you? And then pull back the RPM to about 25 as well. Good. So, levelling out. So we'll pull this down to 0 vertical speed, just trim the airplane out a little bit. and you can see it's edging up on about 150 knots. With manifold pressure being, we're nowhere near flat out, so it is pretty rapid, isn't it? So if we turn around, do another U-turn over the valley here, let's lean forwards so we can actually see out the corner. So we've got the late afternoon sun here in Boone Valley. The airfield, so we just fly down this valley a second. So let's open it up and see what happens. So manifold pressure has gone just beyond 30. And trimming to stop the lift from kicking the nose in the air. What's it going to do in terms of speed in a straight line? There's hardly any wind today and it's nice and warm. So it's about 165 knots by the look of it. I think at altitude it would go a fair bit faster than that. So it's a pretty quick aeroplane. And of course we're not absolutely jamming the RPM either. So we could get it to go a fair bit faster, probably, if we really wanted it to. So let's go and fly towards the VOR. There we go. Now, do we get... Yeah, we get the distance measuring equipment in here. Hasn't got a dedicated kind of old school distance measuring equipment set, which is a bit of a shame. So we have a look on the map, we can see we're heading towards the VOR, and then we want to leave this VOR. If we just measure this by hand, 22 degrees or 20 degrees basically, to fly over towards Ukiah Municipal. Visibility out of the sides is great. It's just a shame that there's that huge hoop. But yeah, you can see the material modelling kind of does let it down a little bit when you start looking closely at the wings. It's not quite up to the standard of aircraft that have come out recently. So you can see here comes the VOR, and then we want to turn left to 20 degrees, don't we? So if we can change our course to 20, if I can even get to it. Oh, the aeroplane is bobbling around a lot as we're going over these hilltops. So we should be going, yeah, we're from the VOR now, so we'll continue on and then turn left, get the needle to line up, and we'll continue on that radial away from the VOR, and we should take us straight to Ukiah, straight over the top of it. Should we increase the RPM and see what this will do? The manifold pressure doing still off the end, but only just. Let's just pull it back a tiny bit. So yeah, I think this will do about 170 knots, maybe. You know, best conditions if we level it out. So yes, it is as fast as they said. So we're slightly off to side of the track. Obviously, if we look down over the nose, we will see, trying not to bash our head on the roof, You see there's the airport down there for Ukiah, so we'll just loop round. Let's just check the wind. So wind on the ground down there in the valley is 7 knots, 160 degrees. So yeah, the support's coming in runway 15 anyway. So we'll be fine with that. So we'll slow this thing down. So 75% throttle, it's right in the middle of the manifold pressure range, which is great actually. Put the RPM back a little bit. So just before we do go in for our approach, let's just fly out over these fields over here and should we do some stall tests. So we'll translate some of the, or transfer some of that airspeed into altitude. So we're climbing 1500 feet a minute. This thing can climb, look. It's hardly losing speed. It's incredibly powerful. So let's pull it up to a bit of a steeper climb. So you can see the indicated airspeed is falling off. We'll do our best to keep the attitude level. And it's dropping. And I'm going to hold. Yeah, it's not going to spin. But we do need to be careful about airspeed. Look, we're just going into the yellow there momentarily. Let's get our altitude back. So let's try and do that again without power. So we're in a climb. So it just mushes down. It is very heavy on the nose. If you don't have any thrust, it wants to fall into the floor. Okay. So let's have a look at where we are now, having gone zooming off up the valley. So we're going to do a U-turn around and come back in for an approach into Ukiah. There's the airfield. So I'm inclined to do a touch and go first and then come in properly just to get a feel for how it approaches the runway. It appears so far it's very, very docile to fly. There's no big surprises, but we'll see what happens when we get over the runway. Because quite often things can be very stable in the cruise and then jump around like a box of frogs when you get anywhere near the runway. So we need to lose some speed. So while we're doing that, let's have a look at the undercarriage animation, shall we? Very cool. And what's the flap animation like? So the flaps travel quite quickly, and full flaps are enormous. Okay, so we still have good aileron authority at full flaps. Notice we're not slowing down in a hurry. That's a surprise, and I would wonder about that given that this has flaps like barn doors. Just increasing the throttle. See, I'm always torn with this. If you do an approach by the book in an aircraft like this, you're supposed to use throttle to control descent rate. You know, all things being equal, you hold attitude with the stick and use throttle to control descent rate. I don't completely agree with that. I tend to think that is a method for people who aren't capable of using pitch and throttle together. It's an interesting one. It's kind of like trying to dumb down so you're only able to do one thing. I don't completely agree with it. And no doubt instructors will tell me that there's all sorts of reasons why you should only ever use power, and they're probably very good, valid reasons. But then you go and watch, you know, a professional pilot, and they will use all of the controls at their disposal all the time. They won't narrow it down to using one control. But then if you see somebody have an accident, they'll then pull it back down to the basics and castigate them for not stabilizing their approach, or, you know, things like that. Okay, so let's see how this goes. So yeah, this is odd look. It's hardly losing airspeed. We're at idle. Just flaring it out there. So let's go full throttle. Lift the flaps back up. Back through 70 or 80 knots. So remember, it was quite heavy on the nose. So off the ground again, gear up. So at the moment we're doing about 160 degrees. So let's turn left to about 340 then. Doing quite a steep turn. It's such a powerful aircraft, you can get away with this sort of thing though. Coming up on 340. There's the airfield. Reducing airspeed, and then we'll make our turn back towards the runway, and we'll actually land it this time instead of playing with the aircraft. Okay. Back down. So we're looking at the lights now. A little bit high at the moment. So we're looking for one red, one white on the VASI lights. There we go. Try and maintain that. If we get two reds, we've gone too low. If we get two whites, we've gone too high. There's a fair bit of turbulence actually, considering there wasn't much wind a few minutes ago. We're now being thrown around a little bit. Around, it's quite amusing, isn't it? And now it's saying we're too low, or just on the border of being too low. There we go. So we'll be looking to flare it out over the gone a little bit long. But again, that's just experience. It does seem to float an awful lot. So let's go for wheel brakes. Let's put the flaps up. And look for the exit. So we want to be down to walking pace by the time we turn off the runway. And obviously we weren't doing completely correct procedures today, but we were more interested in how the aeroplane flies than doing things by the book. Is that a camping site? That's the, it looks like it, doesn't it? That the photogrammetry has picked up. Never noticed that before. So yeah, it's I think the big problem with this aeroplane is, yeah, okay, it's one of the older aircraft in the simulator, but it does show the advancements that the developers have made in the modelling, because even the Book of Youngman, made by the same developer, is better than this. But having said that, this does look really nice. It's different, it's a bit quirky, it's easy to fly. Okay, where are we going to park? Should we park next to this? Yeah, where the guy is waiting over here. Seems like a good a place as any, doesn't it? Oh, no, he's walking off now. Having led us on this merry dance around the parking area. Just keep an eye on the wing over there. Okay. So, do we get any propeller animation as it runs down? Yeah, that's pretty good. Let's go and switch some of these lights back off. So we kind of did everything on the bare minimum that we needed to use inside the aeroplane. It is wandering around on the head tracking for some reason. Obviously that's not the fault of the aeroplane. I'm just going to turn it off briefly just to get the aeroplane shut down. So we come back down here and turn the fuel back off. Okay, so can we open the doors is the next question. Yes, we can. And we should find the same on this side. Very good. And can we move? Yes, we can. There's no clipping on the sides of the cockpit, so you can move around it. So we'll just have a final look around. So this was the Socata TB21, let me just check, TB21GT. You get a good there is a PDF manual available. It doesn't install it with the installer. You have to go searching for it on the internet, which I find is a bit of a bugbear. There's lots of developers do that, where they put the documentation on their website, but they actually don't include it with the installer. I mean, okay, yes, it will make the installer bigger, and it does free them up then to update the documentation as and when they want to. Oh, hello. Random AI person who can walk through solid objects. I wonder if anybody got in trouble for that. But yeah, it's modelled well, it's just not exceptional. So there you go, that was the Socata TB21GT in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Hopefully you enjoyed that, and you may well see me flying it again fairly soon. Right, I'm going to leave it there, and I'll see you soon. Take care.